Hi, this is Swati from the softwaretestinghelp.com team, and today is a little tutorial on how to write test cases. Now, in this tutorial, we are going to move a little bit differently because so far we've been doing definition-based tutorials, and this is actually an how-to and a practical guide on how to write test cases. Now, test cases are something that QAs or quality engineers are predominantly associated with. See, most of our careers, no matter how much we grow in our career graph, we might become test leads, test managers, eventually, move up in the career ladder. But as long as I feel like if you're in a testing team, then you will still have to write test cases. So test cases are things that is worth learning correctly because this is something that has a lot of use value. You learn once and you're going to use it for the rest of our careers. So today we will, talk a little bit about how to write test cases, how to write good test cases, that is. And also the reason why a tutorial on test cases feels like it is needed because if you see whether it is ISTQB, CST, any of these, tester level certifications, all of them will have a curriculum where they'll talk about testing, test conditions, and all that. But the real, guideline on how to write the test cases is somehow missing from all of these syllabuses. So I feel like it's a topic that is worth dealing with as an independent, subject, and to actually get an in-depth look into it. So first, let's again, as is a general practice with STH, let's talk about what test cases are, who writes them, and all that. Now, we say this a lot in our class as well. Testing is a three-step process. One is you identify what to test. I mean, first thing is you identify what the requirement is. Second thing is you'll figure out what to test, and you'll follow that up with how to test. So how to test is your test case. So how to test in the sense a detailed step-by-step guideline on how a particular requirement can be tested is your test case document. So test case is what is used for test execution. So to begin with, what test case is a detailed step-by-step instruction on how to perform a certain test on your AUT. Now, who writes the test cases? It is usually the QA team members. So when I say writing, a test case writing process has three steps. One is where you actually document the test case, follow that up with a review, and then you finalize. Usually, test cases are reviewed by business analysts and the development team. Now, the reason why business analysts and the development team get involved with test case review is because they want to absolutely make sure that whatever you are planning to test on the application is in line with the business target of the application. So that's why BAs are involved. Development teams are involved because they are the ones who know the application really well up until the point of testing. So if there are any areas that need to be concentrated more on in the testing effort, the development team will be able to give very useful insights into that sort of a situation, and they'll point you out to obvious areas that you probably will need to focus on more, or if there are any areas that you have missed out. So they'll be able to give such pointers. When our test case is usually written, um, usually software testing lifecycle comprises of three basic steps. One is test planning, the second phase is test design, and the third phase is test execution. So this happens predominantly in stage 2, which is the test design stage. How is our test cases written? That is what we will focus on the rest of the tutorial going forward. And where are these written? Again, because test cases are documents, it does not really apply what environment they are written on. However, test cases are executed on the QA environment if you're talking about the system testing phase. And also test cases, again, let's talk a little bit about where these documents are actually written. Now, I mean, usually you can, there's all kinds of things. Sometimes you can write them in Word documents. Sometimes you can write them in Excel sheets like we are going to do right now. You can actually write them in a simple notepad. You can write them in test management tools like QC or ALM and Qtest. So all of these different modes exist, but the context of environment probably is not a very relevant thing when it comes to test case documentation part. What else are we leaving out? Why? We are we are actually dealing, why we write test cases is to ensure that there is a structure to testing, and to also ensure that there is a certain amount of repeatability. There's also a certain amount of repeatability, and that we are actually, for record keeping, actually, to make sure that we are testing what we need to test, and for future releases you might want to have a record of all the tests that were performed, and also it helps in easy tracking, monitoring, and reporting, of course. So for all of these reasons, we write the test cases. So let's now get to the main part, which is the how to write test cases. Now let's start with the template. See, test cases and any other official documents that you create, it is really important to remember that we are working in a team-based structure. And when you're working in a team-based structure, it never helps to write a document or create any work product in any way that a certain person sees fit. So there has to be a sort of uniform guideline that is to be established among the team members, because unless you do that, it is very hard to measure based on the common terms. So what I'm trying to tell you here is, let's say if some of you will measure the distance in miles, some of you will do in kilometers, some of the others will do in meters, centimeters. So whatever the unit of measure you're using, unless there is a uniformity, it is hard to say who is doing well, who is doing not doing well. There is really no way to measure it commonly. So that is why it is very important to achieve that uniformity, especially when you're writing test cases, something that is going to be either used by you or another tester when the execution is happening. It is much more important to come up with a standard process. And also, process is something which will dictate us how to do our work when nobody is watching. So this is the sort of basic guideline that is very important to set. So one of the first prerequisites of test case writing is to come up with a template. Usually we recommend first creating a test case ID, and we believe that every entity within a QA project should have a should be uniquely identifiable via an identifier, followed by the test case description. So this is a 1 or 2 line guideline on what we are trying to achieve through this test case. Then comes the precondition, the test steps, the test data, expected result, status, and actual result. So while the test case is in design, only these fields get filled up. And while the execution happens, the status and the actual result column can be populated. So to begin with, you will also, so not only is it important to establish template, it is very important to establish how we need to fill each attribute within the template. So for the test case ID, what I generally recommend my teams to do is use a TC as a prefix to just give us an idea that it is a test case. And let's say if it is a create account operation that you're doing. So I would just do a create account _01. So in case I will have to write another test case about registration, I would again restart my numbering. So if there are multiple test cases under create account, I would just use another serial number to denote that, and when I move to a different functionality, I would restart the numbering from 01. So that's how you can form some rules around test case ID. You don't have to absolutely use this, just giving you an idea on how you can use this column. Then comes the description. Keep the description short, keep it concise, and talk about exactly what you're looking for. So if you're doing a create account page, so we are going to take an example of create account on both Google accounts and Walmart.com page, because this is a really good example to understand how to write the test case steps. So let's say the test case condition that I'm looking for is to test if an appropriate error message is displayed when first name is not entered in the account creation process. So here, again, keep it concise and also give an indication of what you're expecting this test to do. So what I mean is you can write it this way: to test the account creation with blank first name. While there's nothing wrong with this description, it does not also give us a clear-cut indication of what is supposed to happen. So try to not be ambiguous to the extent possible, and try to achieve a certain level of clarity, again, as much as you can. So following this, again, you can also have another column to say whether this is a positive or negative scenario. Since this is an alternate flow, this is a negative test case. Usually positive and negative test case, you can denote it by saying positive is where you're testing the happy flow or the normal flow. Negative test case is when you're testing the alternate flow or any kind of errors, notifications, that sort of thing, which are not normal functionality, but the site is also equipped to handle them because they are slight aberrations in the user entry or something like that. The site tries to correct you. So if you are testing a functionality like that, then your test case would be a negative test case. Now precondition. Precondition is basically one, you can use it to set the state of the application, state of the AUT, and the second thing also to basically list out all the data and anything else, etc., that you need to continue with the test case. So let me give you an example. So let me start writing the test steps and come back to the precondition in a little bit. So if I'm testing the let's take Google account page for example. The first thing I will write is launch Google account creation page, and whatever is the URL, I'll provide this URL in the test data column. Now test data column is any data that you're going to submit into the application for something to happen. So while I launch this page, what is supposed to happen here? The create account page is supposed to be displayed. Now the second thing I do is enter the data and things like that. So I'll go ahead with that. So if I want to start with step 1, then my precondition would become gather all the data for the account creation process. So this will be my precondition. But if I'm not starting from here, if I'm starting directly at enter the first name, enter the last name, so if I'm starting directly at the steps, then my precondition would become create account pages launched. So wherever you start your test steps, make sure that the precondition brings you there and leaves you there. So when you write that in as your precondition, you don't have to write these steps. You can start directly at you can write it this way: leave the first name field blank, and whatever are the subsequent steps, you can go ahead and write them. So use your precondition wisely so that you can avoid a lot of redundancy. You can avoid writing the same steps over and over for couple of test cases. So now that we are at the test steps column, there are 3 kinds of test steps in my opinion. One is the input test steps. The second one is where you are, and the third validation kind of a test step, and the third one is output. Now the output is your expected result column that we know already. So we'll come to the output in a little bit. The input is wherever you are providing information to the website. So if in the Walmart.com page, if I go to the creating of an account, what is happening here is if it's a new account and I'm trying to create one, So all of this, so if I'm entering the first name as Swati, then my step would be enter the first name. My test data would be Swati, whatever data I'm entering into it. So any step that begins with enter the data, or enter some data, that is the kind of step where there is an input. Usually to input steps, there is no expected result. Usually the kind of steps that cause a state change, that means, see, when I click on sign in, right now what is happening is the URL of the application is changing. It is moving on to a different instance of the same walmart.com page. So whenever you perform a step that causes a change in the state of the application, so whatever small capacity that might be, so right now here I have this first name, last name and all that, so I'll just enter into the first name field and move out. So even though the URL is the same, the page, the status of the page, the state of the page has changed in terms that there was no message earlier, but this has caused a state change. So anytime you write a step where there is a state change, for that step, write the corresponding expected result. So that is a very important thing. For input steps, there is no expected result. For the kind of steps that will cause a change in the state of the application, there is going to be an expected result, which brings us finally to the validation. So here, if you look at the objective of our test case, it is basically to test if an appropriate error message is displayed when the first name field is not entered in the account creation process. Now again, the Google page, you've seen it already. If I don't enter the first name page, if I just move out of that field, the validation is happening immediately. That means this page checks immediately as soon as I move out on that field that this field is empty right now. So that is, if I need to check whether the error message is coming or not, my test case will simply have one step. Move into the field, move out of the field, immediately you will see an error message. So my test step would be, I don't even need to gather any data. Click in the first name field and move out. I don't even need to provide any data. In this case, my expected result would be an error message is displayed immediately under it, and it reads, you can't leave this field empty, or whatever it might be, right? So that will be your expected result. So on the contrary, if I am creating the same test case for the walmart.com page, here's how this will be different. So again, I'll paste these columns because it's the same thing I'm trying to do. Create account page is launched. I will also keep it at that. And now I'll start writing my steps. So in the walmart.com page, if you notice closely, when I just move out of the first name field, nothing is happening. So for this page to submit the data that I have entered in each fields, I have to first enter all the fields and then click on continue. So right now if I click on continue, it is telling me that first name, last name, email address, re-entering the email address, password, confirming the password, all of these are mandatory steps. So if I need to isolate my first name field problem, if I have to isolate whether the first name validation is happening or not, I will have to provide the data on all other fields. So I'll provide so I have provided all the fields, and when I click on continue, that is when I can isolate that the first name field is not coming up. So this is what I mean by the validation point. So the validation in the first case, it happens when you move out of the field. The validation in the second case, it happens when you enter all the data and click on continue. So a test case is not a test case unless it has one validation point into it, at least one thing that you're checking. So if I were to write for this field, here's what I'll write. Enter the last name. So I'll provide a last name. enter the email address and confirmation email address. So since all of these are data entry steps, there is no expected result. So you would provide the data that you're going to use in order to test this. And the confirmation one more time, Swati@test. Again, this is not valid, just giving an idea. And in the password field, you would enter whatever password you're entering to check, and also for the confirmation password. And at the end, you will click on continue. So unless you incorporate this step, click on continue, this test is not complete. Make sure that you have at least one validation point in your test at all times. Otherwise, it is not really a test. It will just be data entry and nothing else. So when I click on continue, there is a state change. An error message is now displayed that the please enter a first name. So this is how you can write your test cases. And when you move on to the test execution phase, what you would do is you would pick up your application, make sure that the precondition is set, that is the application reaches to the right state that you need it to be in. Then you would perform the test step, write the corresponding test data, get the expected result, and check the expected result with the actual result. And if they are in harmony, you would set the status as pass. But if there is a deviation, then the status moves to fail. If the test is for some reason not done, it will be incomplete. If it is blocked because of a previously existing issue, you would set the status as blocked. If the test is not run yet, you would leave it as no run or unexecuted and all that. So actual result column, you would set it appropriately whenever there is a deviation to tell exactly what the deviation is. And always remember, when you're writing your test steps, phrase them in a way where you perceive yourself giving instructions. So always think about how you would tell somebody to do something. Say if you're telling a friend to fetch your phone, how would you tell it? Go into this room, go into the living room, on the coffee table, you will find the phone, pick it up, bring it here. So always think about it in the instruction based manner, because you're actually telling the person who is going to run this test on how to do it. So that is another tip on how to write your test cases. And also, you don't have to follow the exact same template always. And also remember that your content is the king always, not the template. So don't adopt a template that is too hard to follow, or that does not make a meaningful relationship with what you're trying to achieve here. So imagine, first think about what kind of data or content you want to create when it comes to your test cases, and find a way that you can organize that, find a template that you can use in order to organize that data in a manner that makes most sense. So it's always content over format. So you don't have to use this format if this does not work for you. It is always up for changing. You can expand this template as you like. You can contract it as you like. And then always remember that you don't have to use an Excel sheets. If you want, you can use Word documents and all that. The only reason why Excel is famous is because if you were to use a test management software, for example, like QC, once you write all your test cases in an Excel sheet, QC, you can directly upload them to QC, which makes it very, very easy to interface. So that's why Excel is a preferred choice in the market. Well, I hope this session has been helpful in giving few pointers about how to write test cases. As always, if you have any comments or questions, please let us know. Thank you so much.